Thank you for listening to the Content Magazine podcast, conversations with Silicon Valley's creatives.
Welcome to the Content Magazine podcast. My name is David Valdespino, the developer of Content Magazine, and today we are sitting down with a Mountain View-based filmmaker who has spent the last 2 decades writing, directing, producing, and developing his production house, which is Civilized Beast. He began his journey in honors literature at UC Santa Cruz, and later earned an MFA from USC's School of Cinematic Arts, a writer and director whose work has been recognized by the Academy Nicholl Fellowship, Austin Screenplay Competition, and Sundance Screenwriters Lab, and he is the filmmaker behind his first feature film, Blur. He's joining us today to talk about his life, his career, his inspiration, and his latest award-winning project, Reunion, which is starring Jake Choi, and will make its world premiere at Cinequest Film Festival here in San Jose. So, John Kim.
Wow, it sounds super impressive. I don't know if I can live up to that. Thank you for that introduction.
Yeah, so I like to kind of set the table for everyone, get you introduced here, and
Sure.
You know, in that intro, we talked about you being a writer, filmmaker, producer, director. So for folks that don't know what those things are, maybe we can kind of like parse the difference between writing and directing, for example.
Yeah, I mean, writing is really the beginning of everything. And sometimes it gets lost in the shuffle because what you see is the finished product, and you see all the glamorous actors and you see these erudite directors. But it doesn't start without a story. And the writer's the one who has to sit there and try and create something out of nothing. Mm-hmm. And then that's sort of the vessel that attracts people to a project.
Yeah.
It's the thing that attracts actors, directors, investors, and that's the thing where the idea is the spark. So we were really lucky that we were able to get the script for Reunion recognized. You had mentioned the Nicholl Fellowship and the Austin Screenplay Competition. I've been in the second round and the finalist round for a lot of those competitions.
Yeah.
And that sort of gave me the encouragement to continue developing these projects, because the fundraising is the hardest part. It's the most expensive art form.
Totally.
And so you can have a great idea, and then you can execute that great idea, and then you have to gather people around the fire. You have to get people to acknowledge that. The directing part is, I can't really separate it from producing when you are making an independent film, because when you're making an independent project, which is usually lower budget, you have to be involved in every process.
Totally.
Part. And with directing, it was partly explaining to investors and partners what the film was about.
Yeah.
This is a, sort of mistaken identity comedy. And also to describe to actors why they should be in the film. And when you have a very small reputation, you're just starting out, the idea is that they want to know who's making the film and why.
Yeah.
And you have to be convincing to get really good people. And we got a lot of really good people for this film, besides Jake, Madeline Zima, Kelly Garner, Franz Lawton, really great, Candy Clark, who is a legend, Academy Award nominee from American Graffiti, was able to join us. So it's really kind of like building a community. The third part that you don't really mention a lot, because you never see them, is the producer. And the producer, when you have a good one like we had with Noah Pittefer and Michael Winnick and Sebastian Twardosh, you have people who will gather other people. Mm-hmm. And it's really like, I think the metaphor I used was like, it's like building a ship to go into the ocean. You have to have a plan for the ship, and then you have to build it, and then you have to fill it with supplies, and then you have to push it into the water.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much.
And I think that's kind of a good segue, right? Because you talked about building your community and, steering the ship there. But kind of zoom in all the way back to your early days, right? So you grew up in the Bay Area.
Yeah, I did.
After immigrating from South Korea.
That's correct.
And so can you kind of walk me through like what that scenario was like, where you were, right? Were you in Mountain View at that time? Because I know you're in Mountain View now.
My parents came before me, of course, and I was in South Korea until they got settled in the United States. And there was I did a little research about this. There was kind of a second wave of immigration laws that took place after the Korean War. And my mother and my father were in the last stages of that wave into the 1960s. And they were able to get established first in the Midwest, in Chicago, and then they came immediately out to the Bay Area because they couldn't stand the cold weather. And also because I think it was too familiar to Korea.
Yeah.
And also because there was opportunity here in the 1960s. There was the NASA space program, and they needed this tremendous number of engineers. There were opportunities in these communities. Housing was relatively inexpensive. It's hard to believe, but you could actually afford to buy a home in the Bay Area. And also there was this kind of concentration of schools like Berkeley, like Stanford, Santa Clara, Santa Cruz, where I went to undergraduate.
Totally.
And I think that my parents understood the value of that. And my father, who happened to be an engineer, they realized this was a place to settle. And then I didn't speak any Korean after the age of 5.
Yeah.
My parents told me specifically, my father said, don't speak Korean because you have to assimilate. And they forbid my speaking Korean in the house.
Interesting.
And that's how I learned English. And I tell my mother, the irony, of course, is that I ended up not only studying English literature, but I ended up teaching English.
Yeah.
So it worked. Now I have to go back and try and figure out how to learn Korean again, which I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
But that was part of my assimilation. And then the other thing that I think I've talked about before is that I was really lucky. I literally lived across the street from a library, and I sort of grew up in a golden age of American film in the 1970s. And I think the combination of those two things, along with the area in Palo Alto where I grew up,
Okay.
sort of was the perfect storm. You know, it was a safe place for me to learn. I read voraciously. I started writing when I was in junior high school. I started acting in plays when I was in high school. And I just thought to myself, how am I going to get from here to there?
Yeah.
And I think to a degree, I looked around because I really loved acting at that time in high school. I was with a group of friends who were terrific. And I realized there was no one that looked like me on television or in the movies, you know. And I thought to myself, how do you get from here to there? And I realized there was no path. And I thought to myself, but if you write something, and maybe if you learn how to make something, my Machiavellian plan was maybe then I can put myself in those movies.
Yeah.
And then the irony is, writing and directing movies was so hard and so all-consuming that I forgot about acting. And I thought to myself, well, okay, I'm going to make these films. But even then, it took a while for me to cast Asian actors in my films. And I really had to take a moment to understand that when I was in college, because I was so indoctrinated in American culture. I just didn't see anyone like myself on the screen.
Totally.
So it never occurred to me that there would be somebody like myself, even in my own movies, until my graduate thesis film at USC. And it was a real kind of awakening. I really had to sort of check myself, like, why are you doing this? It's like, well, because no one else is doing it.
Yeah.
So why would you do it? And this was before, you know, Wong Kar-wai, you know, came to the United States. This was before Shopping for Fangs and people like Justin Lin. This was before, obviously, John Chu, who ironically grew up like a stone's throw from my house in Mountain View. His father famously runs Chef Chu. Shameless plug for Chef Chu. I never met John, but he did go to USC also.
Yeah.
And but when he was growing up and when I was growing up, there was almost no Asian representation.
Totally.
And I sort of made it my mission after graduating from USC. It's like I made a conscious effort to understand why that was, and I made a conscious effort That's why Jake Choi, who happens to speak Korean American, is the star of Reunion.
Yeah.
And it's why I look for stories that have representation, not just for Asians, but for African American, for Latino. We have a differently abled actress in our film who is just another character. It's not some grand statement about ADA, although we deal with a lot of ADA when we do logistics.
Yeah.
But I just realized, and I think other people are realizing today, that there's just a bigger world. You're told a very specific thing about your culture. And in the United States, there is, as you might have noticed, this dominant strain where we're told that you're supposed to only look like this and not like that.
Yeah.
You're only supposed to behave like this and not like that. It just isn't true. And I think it's really harmful because then you grow up with a population like incredibly diverse communities like San Jose, and you go out onto the street. That's not what America looks like. And you go into a movie and you watch a Hallmark film, and then you walk down Market Street and you go like, that's not, these people aren't in these shows.
Yeah.
But I think there's a broadening now over the last 10 or 15 years where you start seeing content creators, TV writers, directors, filmmakers, and they start to realize like, oh, the world is a much bigger place.
Yeah.
And I think it's healthier too. It might be uncomfortable for people, but it's okay to be uncomfortable.
Totally.
If you're learning something new. So
yeah. It kind of makes me think of like, the content isn't being funneled through one kind of direction at this point. And so when you start seeing all that representation.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
There used to be, when I was growing up, there used to be 3 channels in PBS. That was it.
Yeah.
And if you weren't there at 8 o'clock on Tuesday night, you missed it. Mm-hmm. There was no DVR, there was no recordings, there was no YouTube. Mm-hmm. I think I saw something interesting the other day that said YouTube now is the most watched media channel in the United States. And then the other thing that I saw, which is good and bad for filmmakers, is I think the streaming audience for content is, for movies alone, is 48% of the market. And you know what the next step is. And so a lot of the theatrical distributors, we're lucky that we're going to screen our movie over at the California Theater, right across the street. Giant theater, please come. But the idea is that it's a different experience when it's like live music. You can listen to a record that you love all the time, an album. But sometimes what I feel like is happening when you listen to an album, even streaming, is you're sort of recreating in your mind the experience that you had when you first heard that song.
Totally.
When you were out on a hill and hanging out with your friends, or when you were at a concert and you were seeing that artist. And it's sort of a recreation of that moment. And it's worthwhile. It's a good memory.
Yeah.
But when you see a film for the first time in a theater, if it's a really great film, it's just overwhelming. You are literally sharing it with people around you, even if you don't even talk to them. Mm-hmm. It's a shared experience, and it's like a live event. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious because you talk about growing up in that second golden age of Hollywood. And now we're in this modern era, which you've kind of outlined.
Right.
I'm curious kind of how you would classify the modern age of cinema that we're in.
Wow.
And then I have other stuff, but we'll stop.
Okay. The modern age of cinema, it's so weird.
Yeah.
Because some of it is just dominated by what I call corporate cinema, which is sort of Disney and Marvel and the Star Wars movies. And there are good and bad Disney and Star Wars movies, It's just that those films are so big and so expensive that unless you're somebody like Chris Nolan or even Paul Thomas Anderson, that film is great, one battle after another. But it's also $150 million, and our budget was like less than 1/100th of that, not even 1/10, And I just keep thinking, wow, that would have been great if you could have broken that up into like 4 films. And what often happens, and this is partly the mechanism of streaming, is that the films that have a more unique perspective or are broken down into sort of niches, more serious drama or more risky, like LGBTQ subject matter or diverse ethnic subject matter, for lack of a better phrase, you're not going to get 100 million people to go see that film, especially in a theater.
Yeah.
So you're not going to get $100 million to make that movie. You might get a tenth of that if you're lucky, if you have a star. And that's part of the mechanism of putting together films. So I would say there's a lot of really great filmmakers today. Like, every time I think, oh, well, this is terrible, I will look at a page and go like, look at all these great films that are ready to come out. Look at the filmmakers who are out there like Sean Baker, who did Anora. And look at these people who are getting a chance to make films. And then look at these actors who are willing to take chances, like Rose Byrne, who was nominated this year, or Hamnet. These are small, weird, niche films. Like, why do you want to see a movie about Shakespeare's wife? Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And then it's really one of the best films of the year, So I think for independent filmmakers, the flip side of that is, because technology is so inexpensive now, it's so accessible. It's not cheap. To get a great camera, it still costs a little bit of money. But if you are a young filmmaker, I think if you have an idea and if you have friends and maybe a place to stay while you shoot, you can make a movie.
Yeah.
And whether or not it's any good is up to you. Whether or not you can get anyone to see it is up to you also. That's really the key.
Yeah.
And like, in the 30s and 40s, the key is still distribution. And then the other side of that, which we touched on, is YouTube is distribution. Tubi is distribution. It doesn't have to be just Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and Apple Plus, but they're the giants, So you can still make films now. And the reason why I bring that up is because I spent, 10, 15 years writing stories, and thinking, gee, where is everybody? Like, how come I'm not getting to make this weird film? Like, I'm ready. I went to film school, I wrote the script, like, where's my funding? And of course, the funding is sitting way over on the other side of the room. They cannot be bothered. So you have to either go to them, or you have to figure out what resources you have just to make your own film. I met Wayne Wang once, the director of Smoke and Joy Luck Club and Chan is Missing, great films, was trained in the Bay Area, went to Foothill College and studied film a little bit. And I said, what's your advice to young filmmakers? And he just looked me straight in the eye and he said, just make any film that you can. And this was 20 years ago. He said, it doesn't matter. Just make a film, gain experience, get better at it. Yeah. That's all that he cared about. And that was really a pinnacle. That was a real representation of his career. He went from making, $50,000 films like Chan is Missing in black and white with 16 millimeter film, which was just ridiculous, And then he went on to make, big studio films because of his talent and his ability to craft a narrative. Wong Kar-wai is another director who I admire, who started out making, $100,000 gangster movies because that's all he could afford. And sometimes style comes out of, limitation. So he would have these long swooping takes of wide angles. And I watch those films and they're wonderful. But the part of me that's a producer is thinking to myself, okay, that's one take. So that's a good idea. Now you can go to the other scene and shoot 2 takes, and then you're done with your day.
Yeah.
And it doesn't cost you $100,000 a day.
Yeah.
And those are some of the tricks that you learn when you're directing. So
Totally.
I don't know if that answers your question, but I think this is a fertile time. If you are a young filmmaker and a storyteller, you can make your own movies. That's the one thing that I would say. And if you surround yourself with good people, and you know this under any circumstance, for any endeavor, the key is like the integrity and the hard work of the people that you are with. that is worth more than gold. Because gold will come and go, but people around you who actually believe in what you believe in and who allow you to believe in their dreams and are willing to work, that's one of the things that is always missing. You can do. I still am weirdly an optimist. I feel like you can do almost anything.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think that transitions well also, right? Because you're a filmmaker that's based in Mountain View.
Yes, that's correct.
But you spent time in Santa Cruz.
Yep.
And then you went to USC.
I did.
Which is kind of, the hotbed of where
the belly
folks,
of the beast.
The belly of the beast. That's a good way to put it.
That's correct.
So, having had those two experiences, first of all, I imagine there was a culture shock going from Santa Cruz to USC
Yes.
at the time.
Yes.
But did you view that as kind of being beneficial to your trajectory as a filmmaker, or did it show you what you didn't want to do?
Well, I would say when I went to film school, I knew that USC had this reputation as sort of being a kind of trade school, sort of a factory where they were going to train you to be a filmmaker for the industry. 20 years before that, when George Lucas was there, they would give speeches at the beginning of the school year saying like, you're never going to get a job in the film industry. And if you want to quit, you should quit now and save your parents' tuition. And some people did, George Lucas didn't because he had no other choice, But in the 90s and before that, there was this impression like, okay, if you want to make films, you can go to a film school, USC, UCLA, NYU, and then they'll train you. And it was kind of weird because the training at these schools, in my mind, is always like 10 years old, sometimes 20 years old. Because in these schools, the people who are teaching are teaching techniques and strategies that they learned 20 years earlier. And they're always behind in the technology. And especially in the 90s when video and digital was just peaking out, they would talk to us about, how they shot Policewoman or some TV show from the 1970s or like Columbo. And it's sort of like, man, I don't know what you're talking about. And there was also a real hazing process because these kind of, I don't mean to be ageist, but sort of old-timey teachers, they wanted you to do it their way or the highway. And it was like, yeah, but, we're not working for ABC. We've got like, $4 and a camera. Like, what do we do with $4 and a camera? And that sort of production was much more likely to be aligned with something like the French New Wave in the 1950s or 60s, where they had like 16mm cameras, and you put, Raoul Coutard in a shopping cart, put a bag over his head, and rolled him down the street and shot Breathless, which actually happened.
Yeah.
There are great photos like that. But in a really perverse way, I would say, it taught me a lot about the industry. Not soon enough for me to take advantage of it right away. It took me like 10 years to figure out like, oh, I'm going nowhere. Like, I have to do something. But the issue was sort of like, it was very political. And if you didn't behave, you would get sat in a corner, and you had to make your own breaks. Even though you were at USC, it was no guarantee of anything. I think that there's the old line that if you're an actor, it's 90% unemployment. And I think that if you're a filmmaker, it's also 90% unemployment. I know a lot of USC guys who have had great successes, like Jay Roach, who did, Meet the Parents, and Austin Powers, and, terrific, films on television. But I also meet a lot of people who just dropped off the face of the earth. 5 years, 10 years after film school, they were doing something else. Some were teaching, some were trading stocks, some were just raising their kids, which is very noble. So you really have to have an idea that you have stories to tell. I really believe that. And I think that what USC taught me is like, they're not going to give you anything. You know, I talked to Frank Pearson, who was one of my mentors at USC, who wrote Dog Day Afternoon, a great writer. And he said, you know, this is a really hard industry. Nobody's going to give you anything. You know, just because you're standing in line doesn't mean that you're going to get a chance.
Yeah.
So you have to do, you know, there's a great Steve Martin quote where he says, be so good they can't ignore you. And I always remember that. It's sort of like, okay, I get it. You just have to keep standing there, waiting in line.
And when somebody tells you something like that, right? Like nobody's going to give it to you.
Yeah.
Basically trying to talk you out of what you want to do. I mean, there's a reality to it, right?
Yeah,
but
there's a
but the
reality.
subtext of that
Yeah.
is this is not for everyone.
Yeah.
But like, what part of your brain activates when you hear something like that? When you I mean, just trying to get
I get really mad. I'm really stubborn.
Yeah.
But I think there's a grain of truth. And I think the positive side of it that people are trying to say is they're trying to say, you know, it's not easy.
Yeah.
And it's not supposed to be easy. And so your job is, they're in a really perverse way, they're trying to test you.
Yeah.
They're saying if you don't believe in it, like now's a good time to quit.
Totally.
You know, and that's a lot of what USC was like. It's like there was a part of USC, I know it sounds weird, but it's like, okay, we've got all your tuition money, now you can quit. And it's like, what? It's like, well, you know, I mean, you can keep going for a while, but you know, you don't really have to be here anymore. We don't want you, you know? And it was like, oh, that's very interesting. That's a very interesting exit interview.
Well, I'm curious also too, because you ended up back in Mountain View.
I did.
You know, kind of where your parents ended up and
family
where
was
you were
here, yeah.
raised. I'm curious I mean, your father was a NASA engineer.
Well, he was an engineer who provided parts for the Apollo program.
Yeah.
And he was a general overall engineer, and it was a very fertile time. They needed engineers, and then the NASA program, and then, you know, secondarily, like Moffett Field was like 10 minutes away.
Totally.
Vietnam War is still going on at that time,
Yeah.
in the 60s and 70s, and you need somebody to design things to fly overhead and go up to the moon and all that. That was there.
So what was kind of their perspective in your trajectory and your
Oh my God.
pursuit? Because I mean, there's the Asian immigrant
Yeah.
kind of storyline
Yes.
and stereotype for some
Sure.
reasons, but you're getting that from USC,
Right.
and I'm wondering what the home front looked
My
like.
parents were like, what are you doing? Like, when you're done with this, what are you going to do? And it's like, couldn't you just be a lawyer? And it's like, well, no, not really. I mean, it's like, why? Why would I be a lawyer? And I think the irony that I talk to my friends about a lot is, and this is not just my experience, I think it's a lot of immigrant experiences. Your parents like work hard. They work harder than you will ever know. And they go through unimaginable, you know, humiliation and difficulties. And then you come out the other end and you reap all the benefits of all their hard work, which they're happy to tell you about. And then you sit there going like, hey man, there's like 140 channels on TV and I got a tank of gas, you know, and your parents are like, what are you doing? Like, we're killing ourselves to make a home, right? In the worst circumstances, they're doing their best. And my parents came out of the Korean War. They came out of surviving Japanese colonization, effectively, when they were growing up, when they were my age.
Yeah.
And now we were in this beautiful area, you know, and my father was making a living, my mother was making a living, they were building a life together. And here I was like reading books. And it's like, what do you think, what are you doing? And I always like to say that part of that is because I think in the back of my mind, my mother was artistic. She was a concert level pianist. She had artistic aspirations, I think. My father was much more straightforward as an engineer, obviously. But I think that's the irony of being an immigrant child, is that you are given these opportunities not to go through the struggles of your parents.
Yeah.
And then the return on that is your parents are absolutely flabbergasted with everything that you're doing. They just can't imagine why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Because it's beyond their experience.
And
you know?
despite all of that,
Yeah.
John Kim
Yeah.
has pursued.
Oh no, that sounds terrible.
I'm just, I love it. No, I mean,
stop.
It's. I mean, you had backgrounds in journalism. You said you
I worked
taught
as a journalist.
and
I
everything.
I taught at Foothill and De Anza. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so coming back to Mountain View and staying in Mountain View and starting, Civilized Beast.
Right.
I guess what was kind of the draw to Mountain View in kind of doing it your own way, right?
Right. Well, I think that, first off, I came up to the Bay Area to be closer to my daughter, to get away from Los Angeles. And also, it was a place that I was familiar with. And Mountain View, regardless of, its reputation as a hub for Silicon Valley and so on and so forth, I think Mountain View is quietly an incubator for people who want to find themselves. Andy Weir, the former NASA engineer who wrote The Martian, who wrote Hail Mary, he's from Mountain View. Steve Jobs spent part of his childhood in Mountain View.
Yeah.
It's this kind of weird sort of safe spot. And I know some writers and filmmakers. For me, it was just a place where I could write. And I wrote for 10 years. I wrote scripts that did go to the Nickel Fellowship, semifinalists, that did go to Austin. And I was finally able to understand the industry. I also wrote for a script magazine for a period of time, and they were, they allowed me to interview great writers like Richard LaGravignaise, who wrote The Fisher King, and Frank Darabont, who wrote and directed Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah.
And I was able to understand, I get it. This is the industry. And through those writers, I began to understand, you can write something and it's valuable.
Yeah.
If it's great. That's the other thing about it,
Well, I think that's a good kind of transition into this next project that's premiering at Cinequest, right?
Yes.
So it's a bit of a deviation from your first feature film,
Right.
Blur,
Right.
which from all I could tell, I haven't watched it myself personally, seems like a pretty intense,
it's a very
dramatic
intense thriller. Yeah.
thriller.
Yeah.
And Reunion is a thrilling comedy.
Yeah. We'd like to think so.
Yeah.
And I would say that Blur was almost a filmmaking workshop. I made that film, and about 80% of the people who made the film had never made a feature film before, including myself. And I just had the hubris I'll just take these random strangers and teach them how to, and it was just a nightmare. But it was a real learning curve that was involved. With Blur, we had more funding, and we were able to hire professional actors, a really talented DP from San Francisco and Los Angeles, Eduardo Ramirez. And we were able to take what I knew about production and put together the smallest shooting schedule on the smallest budget and shoot in LA. And as you probably know, we shot on January 7th, 2025, which was the day of the Eaton and Palisades fires, which was the worst natural disaster in Southern California history. And that was our first day of shooting. And we got about 3/4 of the way through the day, and somebody said, "Look out in the mountains, that looks like fire." And we had to shut down for the day. We had to shut down for a week to reassess whether we could actually shoot. And then what I think is an equal calamity, without being too political, there was the inauguration on January 20th. And I think between those two dates, we really sort of had to gather together as a group and say, look, we're all doing this together. I mean, some people were traumatized. We had a member of our crew lose his home in the Eaton fires in Altadena. We had a number of people who were evacuated during the course of shooting. Everybody was on their phones getting notifications, all up and down the coast. but it was something where I wanted to give that to myself and to the people around us to make a comedy with some sort of hope, to show what it's like to be utterly lost, like the main character is in Reunion, and to be even more lost at the end of the evening, but to be able to find oneself in this process. You know, the idea of somebody going to his high school reunion to jumpstart their lives is already a desperate enough idea. And then to get lost and go to somebody else's high school reunion and be mistaken for somebody else.
And be found.
And then be found as a complete imposter, which is what the story is about. It's how he survives. It's like Cinderella as a fraud, and you know that's part of that process. And I like farce. I come from a theater background, so I enjoy actors. I respect and appreciate actors, and we were able to get some really terrific performances out of really good young actors, actors who had been in shows like Party Down and Veronica Mars, Kelly Garner, who had worked with everyone from Daniel Radcliffe to Martin Scorsese. You know, she had like 2 days on The Aviator when she was younger.
Yeah.
And of course, Candy Clark, who was an absolute joy to work with, who had been in American Graffiti and was nominated for an Academy Award for that. And somehow we were able to just gather people in the locations and work not quite as a theater troupe, but about as close as we could. And there was a lot of real joy. As much as I'd like to think the script gathered people around, it's really a joy to have actors and technicians who can add to the process. And you are not doing a good job as a director if you are not allowing people to participate and contribute and shape with their ideas and their enthusiasm, because that's really what makes the hard work in making a film like this really special.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard some of your kind of chats about the folks that are in the film, and you seem so genuinely
Oh yeah, I love our actors
and pleased, and in some ways it kind of gives me that you know, the coach that has played kind of vibe of
that's a very good analogy. I never thought of that. But if you
and not every director writes, and not every writer directs, and not any of the combination have been in theater classes, right? So you know.
Yeah, there are some directors I've been told by actors that just don't know how to talk to actors because they've never acted themselves or they've never directed theater. I know that it's easier for directors sometimes just to hide behind the camera.
Yeah.
And because the technical part is the part they can control. And there are other people who are very good with actors, but they don't know how to shape the material. And I was lucky enough where if we were shooting and something wasn't working or a circumstance changed, I could change it because I was the writer.
Yeah.
And so I could just talk to the producer, which is Noah and myself, and say, okay, we're doing it this way. And you could shift it. And the actor seemed to respond to that, because if an actor has a good idea, you're obligated to use it.
Yeah.
You have to try. Otherwise, you end up shutting that actor down. I remember having an early conversation with Madeline Zima, who plays Molly in the film, who's just absolutely fantastic. And we were having earlier conversations about, you know, all these little vignettes we have where the class president is on the PA and giving all these little announcements to everybody, whether they want to hear it or not. And she said, you know, I have this sonnet that I really love from Shakespeare. And what if she just had this like dramatic flourish? And we were at a coffee shop talking about this. And I said, you know what, that's brilliant. Let's use it. And she was like, really? And we went into the studio and we recorded it. And it's all over. And then the irony, of course, is that I was watching Hamnet about 6 months ago. And Jessie Buckley starts drifting into this sonnet. And it's like, wait a second, I know that sonnet. they stole our sonnet. And of course, that's not how film works. But it's like, those are really good impulses. Now, I will say that Madeline's reading is as good as Jesse Buckley's, no question. But also, it's appropriate for our film. And that's sometimes what you have to deal with. And you know, we have people like Franz Lawton and people like Ludi Lin, you know, from the Mortal Kombat series, which is kind of a change of pace, which is, I think, the reason why he wanted to make this film. And so, whether it's people like, you know, Crystal Rivers or, you know, any of our other performers, we're so lucky to have people who want to contribute.
Yeah.
You know, and that's really what you're looking for, because I think, you know, there's this sort of great man theory about movie making, like, oh, it's Orson Welles and nobody else made this film. It's like, really? That was his first movie. I think he had a lot of help.
Yeah.
Or even Steven Spielberg, who's very generous with his, you know, including contributors like, you know, John Williams, or he constantly works with actors over and over again, because when you find really good or great actors like a Tom Hanks or Harrison Ford, you want to work with him over and over again.
Yeah.
And the secret of film, especially independent film, is you need a lot of people contributing. You need like a small, you know, army, like a ninja group of 10 or 12 people who are on the same page, who can go out and get people to do the work that is needed to be done, and then congregate back in front of the cameras for 10 or 12 hours a day. And it's a lot of work. And one of my favorite films about independent film is a Tom DiCillo film called Living in Oblivion. And if you haven't seen it, it's a must-see. It's the kind of movie that I would show to my film class before they started thinking about being some fancy filmmaker. It's like, the coffee is bad, and the milk is sour, and the actress is having a problem with the actor because she slept with him the other night. And this is really what independent filmmaking is. And it's sort of like, it's one of those things where while you're doing it every once in a while, the worst day of shooting makes you wonder what is wrong with you. Like, why are you doing this? And then realizing you have like 19 days left. And then the best day, though, is like you feel like you're floating. It's like, oh, this is the way it should be all of the time. And of course it's not. But with 20/20 hindsight, a year later, because we finished shooting February 7th of last year, I like to joke that you only make a film after you've forgotten how hard the last one was. And I'm in that process, and I like to think that, you know, through Cinequest and the California Theater, when we have our screening, it's like, that's part of the cathartic cleansing process. Oh, this is, we're showing a film.
I can do this again.
Yeah, I don't have to get up at like 6 in the morning. This is fantastic.
I love that.
And, but you have to care about it that much, because, you know, it's like that old quote from A League of Their Own, you know, Lowell Gans and Bob Lou Mandel, and somebody was complaining, Tom Hanks, the manager, and saying, I can't do this anymore, it's too hard. And it's my favorite quote about anything in movies. He says, the hard is what makes it great. If it were easy, everyone would do it, you know? And that's how I feel about film. It's like, you make a film, and if you want to make another one, then that's it for you. And if you have any sense after you make a film and you look around and you have 4 friends left, it's a miracle.
Yeah.
Because you will use every favor that you have, and every piece of equipment, every smart person, every pair of eyes on a piece of text that you write. And you have to listen when people say, should it be that way? And instead of getting angry, and you know, you get angry, you have to listen to people. And I think that's the most important thing, is you have to be able to use the skills that other people have and to contribute, because at the end of the day, you're doing something collectively. And It's not just one person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's kind of been a takeaway from kind of reviewing your portfolio and kind of the things that I've seen. Like,
Yeah.
oftentimes there's kind of this everyman working class person that's kind of at the center, whether it's Urban Defender, which is the kind of comic TV
great.
series that you're working on.
I should have brought you guys a copy. I'm going to bring you guys a copy of Urban Defender.
Or even, Reunion, or even Blur, right?
Right.
And it's these kind of people that are in unexpected or kind of unusual situations. Yep. And that's kind of my takeaway. But I'm curious for Reunion, which will be premiering, what do you hope folks take away from that experience of sitting down and watching Reunion?
I want them to be entertained and engaged. I want them to be curious. I want them to look at this guy who is literally embalming dead bodies in a mortuary at the beginning of the movie, talking to himself and dancing in this room. And I want them to ask themselves, what is this guy doing? What is he thinking? And then once he goes on this adventure and tries to get to this reunion, I want them to ask themselves, what would I do if I had a chance to restart my life? And then to see if you can get ahead of him. Because one of the things that I'm proudest of with this film, we've screened it to just a small number of people, and I always ask them, like, did you know what was going to happen at the end? They said, no, it was a complete surprise. And that's the thing I'm proudest of everything in the film. It's like, I want you to keep guessing through every step of this character. And I also want people to understand that there's hope. You can change the course of your life, but you have to take that chance. You're not just what other people tell you, what you are. There's a great song that we use in the movie by John Doe, the great punk rocker from LA, and it's called "It's Never Enough," and it's in the key in the middle of the film, and it's really about these characters, because the other side of the mirror is that he's thrust into this sort of upscale high school, and all these people who should be wildly successful 20 years later, and they don't feel wildly successful. And so they lean on him secretly to give them what they want, which is, money or fame or validation. And I think that that is sort of the American dream and the American disease. We want other people to validate us. We want money and fame so that other people look at us. And we never look inside of ourselves to see who we really are. I know that's very kind of, Buddhist, but it's sort of like, if you know who you are, you don't need other people to tell you who you are. You don't need other people to, be engrossed in your success. You can be successful by engaging in something that you care about and caring about the things that you believe in. And that's the thing that I hope that people get out of this film while they watch all this calamity and running around and disguises and...
I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Like that.
Well, hitting the e-brake on you, switching gears.
Sure.
What is John reading right now?
Oh.
Do you have any books that you've got on the nightstand?
I do.
Yeah.
I am writing now, so this is my weird quirk. I try and read 2 books at a time, and right now I'm reading John Grisham. And I know people look down on John Grisham. John Grisham is like a great popular writer. And the thing that I admire about him, he's so industrious. Like, he literally writes a book a year. And I don't know how you do that. But I like it because his stories have plot. And they're literally page turners. And I'm writing something right now that I can't talk about, but I'm just deeply embedded in it, that where I'm constantly thinking about what happens next. Why is this person doing this? And you're building it from scratch, when you're writing first draft. And the other book that I'm reading is a book that Jackie Reichley, my partner, gave me as a Valentine's gift, and she knows me well. And I believe the title is something like When Hollywood had kings, or the last of the Hollywood kings. And it's a great book about George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola and Steven Spielberg, and how they became friends and their lives intertwined in the 70s, and how each one of them had a different skill set, but relied on each other at different times during that period to make films like The Godfather and American Graffiti and Jaws and Close Encounters of the Third Kind and Apocalypse Now and Star Wars. I'm just like, those are all the films, you know? And they all knew each other in a collegial manner. They weren't successful when they first met each other, but they kept reading each other's scripts. Coppola famously helped produce American Graffiti for George Lucas.
Yeah.
He had produced his first film, which was a terrible flop, called THX 1138, which is not a bad film, but like nobody wanted to see it. And then Spielberg and Lucas had this great sort of synergy where each one at a point in time in their careers were jealous of the other one. There's a great story about Spielberg seeing THX 1138, which was a student film at USC, and he was just blown away, because it's really this amazing thing. If you see it on YouTube, it's still an incredible student film. And then Lucas, like a couple of years later, saw Duel, which was the Steven Spielberg TV movie, and watched it while there was a party going on, because you could only watch it on TV, and he was blown away. And then Coppola made The Godfather, and Spielberg, I just got to this chapter in the book, where he sat in a theater and he watched The Godfather. He was making his own films by that time, and he was so blown away, he was depressed. He came out of the theater saying, like, I don't know what I'm doing. I can't make a film that good. And of course, as it turns out, no one could make a film as good as The Godfather. But he said, like, I should quit now. And he was working as a paid director at Universal.
Yeah.
So that kind of reading sort of inspires me to, like, oh yeah, this is the industry. And then over here, here's some plot. And then every once in a while, I'll try and sneak in a third book just to keep my mind. But I do it because—
Always research.
Well, yeah, because I think one of the gifts that you get when you're in the arts, when you're writing, when you're doing magazines, journalism, you get to care about words. You get to care about ideas. You get to meet people and be engaged in their lives. And that's not something you can do when you're hiding behind an actuarial table or a screen, you know. And to me, that's a gift that I never complain about, because that's an opportunity for you to reach into someone else's life, or to hear the music that they play in their minds. And I think that that is something that people who don't do that and don't engage in that really don't understand. Like, why are you doing this? It seems so hard. Like, you're never going to get anywhere. It's like, I'm already there. I'm already there. I'm talking to people. I'm talking to myself. I'm listening to the voices in my head. I'm listening to the voices around me. I'm going to create a story out of nothing. And there's something about that that is really magical. And you don't have to brag about it. It's not some secret superpower, but it is. You know, it's like, I'm going to make something out of nothing. And then you have 100 people around you and they're staring at you like, what are we doing? It's like, I'll think of something, just give me a minute. You know, we're here for a reason. I remember, okay, I got it. Yeah. And that's what is in Reunion, hopefully. I love it. You know, yeah. So that's what I'm hoping.
John, I really appreciate you sitting down with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Reunion is world premiering.
World premiere.
March 15th.
12:30.
At
California
Theater, part of Cinequest 2026.
Absolutely.
And
we have a Mountain View screening on the 21st, also at the Alamo Drafthouse. But yeah, the grand world premiere is March 15th, San Jose, downtown, right down the street from where we are. Right down the street from Original Joe's. You can't miss that. And come and celebrate with us. There'll be a Q&A. We're going to have some of our cast. Yeah, it's going to be a celebration. And it's only an hour and a half. We hope to engage you for that much time.
Awesome.
Better than TV on a Sunday afternoon, I promise you.
Well, thank you so much, John.
Thank you so much for having me. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Content Magazine podcast. Follow us on social media at Content Mag. Become a member and help us to continue to tell the stories of the South Bay creatives.